So it's a rainy day during rush hour, so people will be parking and so on. But welcome to this lecture by Professor Sally Engle from New York University. The last time I introduced Sally, I was trying to think about that. It would have been in 2004, 2005. And I had written up a typed presentation. And I thought, a lot has happened since that time. One of which is that she's added to her total of books by approximately 40%, publishing three books since 2005. So clearly, I wasn't able just simply to recycle the remarks from 2005. So let me give you a little sense of what this event is about, and then I want to say a little bit about Professor Mary. This event is being co-hosted by the Center for Law, Justice, and Society. And ICAR, primarily by the Center for Law, Justice, and Society. And this is a new center on campus, as many of you might know, which is dedicated to the study of law and society and culture. And reflects the fact that here at ICAR we have a nice convergence of law and society scholars. And Professor Mary is actually an advisor to the board. And this year we have a series of inaugural lectures. And people have been coming in from different parts of the country, and so Professor Mary is our next speaker in this line. And I'm not sure, John, do we have other speakers on?
This may be it for the academic year.
This might be, yeah. Sally Mary might be the finale for the year, and so it's been very heartening for us, those of us associated with the center, to have such distinguished scholars agree to come to George Mason. To talk about their work and to really launch the center with panache. So again, I was thinking about what to say, how to introduce Professor Mary to this audience, and I thought what I would do is just talk very briefly about her intellectual biography, which is extensive. And I had a nice hallway conversation with Professor Wallace Warfield before the event, who reminded me that Professor Mary actually published very interesting works in the 1980s that were read by scholars in conflict resolution. And her initial studies were on perceptions of danger and security in major American cities. And her 1981 book, Urban Danger, was an ethnographic study of perceptions of security risks, who is considered dangerous and who isn't. And I think one of the important findings of that book is the idea that danger is itself relative to those perceptions. And that was a book which did get some traction among urban studies scholars. She continued her work in the United States for her next project, which was throughout much of the 1980s, in which she was interested in the question of identity and legal consciousness among working class Americans. And that work, which included studying courts and studying the way in which working class Americans access the justice system in the United States, led to her 1990 book, Getting Justice, Getting Even, which, as I said, in 2005, and I think this hasn't changed, is still the definitive work on legal consciousness among working class Americans. Now, after this sort of early period in her work, she turned to the international realm and became interested in questions of empire and identity, and turned, as someone who works in the highlands, who has worked a lot in the highlands of Bolivia, I have to envy the fact that Professor Mary turned her attention to Hawaii, and was interested in the way in which legal categories and law more generally was used as part of the colonial, primarily American empire in Hawaii. And again, this body of research led to her 2001 book, Colonizing Hawaii, which won the prize for legal history from the Law and Society Association, which would have been 2002, I believe. And there were other edited volumes and other work related to law and empire. This brings me, I think, to the most recent phase in her work, which was that as part of this internationalizing of Professor Mary's work, she became interested in issues of human rights and the role of human rights in shaping identity, and in particular in the role of international and transnational institutions in inculcating this new human rights consciousness in the post-Cold War period. And this is this is actually where she and I, our own research interests intersected. But during this period of the mid-2000s, early to mid-2000s, Professor Mary began a multi-sided and multinational study of the CEDAW system. So this is the system that enforces the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the women's rights provisions of international law. And when I say that she studied this, she actually went to multiple countries around the world and met with human rights activists and watched the way they did their work and studied the contradictions in the way in which the idea of human rights is being spread in different parts of the world. And this body of work led to yet another book, important book, her 2006 book, Human Rights and Gender Violence, which was published by the University of Chicago Press. Now at this time, she and I were also working together, and I will only mention one edited volume, which is the one we worked to together. We're the only one worth mentioning, maybe. And so we collaborated on a project, as many of you know. I see a lot of my students in the audience, so you've worked with this volume before, which was the book, The Practice of Human Rights, which was along the same lines, bringing together scholars to think about what the empirical study of human rights institutions have to tell us about the idea of human rights more generally and its life in the 21st century. And as I said, after 2005, there's yet another volume that Professor Mary has been working on, which reflects her long-standing interest in gender violence more generally. And this was the 2008 Blackwell volume, sort of an introductory overview on gender violence. And again, I want to emphasize, this is just a very abbreviated version of Professor Mary's intellectual biography, which I wanted to think about what would be the one thing I would say, the one lesson that I've learned from watching Professor Mary over the years, and that is that she has been productive throughout her entire career without let up, without seeming pause. But what's more important than sheer productivity is that I think Professor Mary has been passionate about each of the subsequent projects that she's embraced throughout her career, which has been a great lesson for me and a great lesson for other scholars and colleagues. In terms of some of her professional positions, I'll just mention the fact that she's currently a member of the Executive Committee of the American Anthropological Association. She is a past president of the Law and Society Association, past president of the Association for Political and Legal Anthropology, and she's currently the director of New York University's Law and Society program and a professor in the Department of Anthropology. And Professor Mary Sally has been a mentor and a good friend to me, and it's a great pleasure to welcome her to ICAR and at George Mason University. So please join me in welcoming Professor Mary.
Thank you very much, Mark, for a lovely introduction. It's always amazing when somebody actually takes the time to read your things and understand it and present it all so beautifully. I feel like you should just give my talk.